So welcome to this class on economic pricing. This is part one of the three classes that we have on economic pricing. And here we'll start from the statement that we already made in the previous classes that markets often do not reflect the true economic value of resources. So decision makers should be aware that if they base their decision on market values, they could get equilibria that are not efficient from an economic point of view, and they could have an allocation of resource that is not efficient for the economy as a whole, for several reasons that we have already in part analyzed and we'll analyze in this class. So we need economic pricing. We need to pass from market value to economic values, and this activity of determining economic prices is called by definition economic pricing, and we'll start that today. So the outline of today is an introduction about economic pricing. Then we'll talk about shadow versus accounting prices. We'll see the theoretical and the practical differences between shadow accounting prices. And finally, we'll enter into the details of economic pricing of project resources, in particular talking about the different approaches that we can have in economic pricing of project resources. So let's start from the introduction. So economic pricing is the objective of measuring the impact of resource use or production on economic indicators. In other words, we can say that economic values are measures of the impact of the use or production of resources on economic indicators. So what we are interested in economic prices is how the use of resources or the creation of resources impacts on some economic indicators that reflect the objective of the national plan that we are taking into consideration. And economic pricing, once applied, should lead to improved optimal allocation of resources. So this section will deal with economic pricing and its implication for the pricing of resources and with its implication for the measurement of the economic value of resources. So in order to understand better how economic pricing works, we have to analyze how shadows are different from accounting prices, and however, under which conditions you can use accounting prices in lieu of shadow prices. And in order to do that, we have to start from the definition of shadow prices. So classic shadow prices are derived from an economic model, typically a model in equilibrium, where basically I am able to gauge the effect of a given resource on the economic indicator of interest. So in other words, shadow prices can be seen as measures of the effect of the use and production of resources on some measure of economic value. That could be the gross domestic product, but could be also another indicator depending on the objective we are considering. So we can say that the shadow price is the effect on the value of the objective function resulting from an increase of one unit of a scarce resource. So the idea here is that you have a model where the output is determined by several different indicators. The model is in equilibrium, and the shadow value is concentrated on a specific factor or resource. And so the idea is to see how the change in one unit of the resource of interest affects the economic output of keeping all the other indicators constant. So this is the idea. The shadow prices should be the sensitivity of the output to a unit variation of the resource of interest, keeping all the other factors constant. This will be the theoretically ideal way to calculate shadow price, and will be clearly also the most correct from a methodological and theoretical point of view. However, even though from a theoretical point of view this is the best solution, it's often unfeasible in practice because it's very hard to estimate equilibrium model that accounts for all the factors of production, and it's very hard, even though I use sophisticated econometric techniques, to isolate the precise effect of one factor on the economic output. So, given the difficulty that I have to estimate shadow prices in the setting of an economic equilibrium model, often economic analysis uses second-best accounting measures. So these second-best accounting measures means that we are referring to accounting prices, but these prices are corrected to account for the problem of market price distortions and externalities that we have seen in the previous classes. So in this context, we can define accounting prices as economic prices that are derived by means other than economic equilibrium models. And they can refer to both inputs and outputs of a project, in the sense that you could price both the resources that are used as input for a project or resources that are generated by the project, so that represent the output of the project. And accounting prices apply differently to input and output of a project. Clearly, accounting prices can be estimated in several different ways, but there are some standard approaches that are valid in general for input and for output. So in the case of inputs, accounting prices are basically opportunity costs. In particular, when I'm evaluating the economic value of a resource, adopting accounting prices, the accounting price will be the cost for the economy of using 1 unit of that resources for this project and not for the best alternative use. So we have the typical definition of opportunity cost. In the case of output, if I want to use accounting prices, I have to measure the contribution of 1 unit of the produced good to the economic value, where the measure of economic value could be the gross domestic product or another measure of interest of the government. So the idea in this case is that the accounting price of the output that is generated by the project should measure not its commercial value based on market value, but should be based on the contribution that this output will give to the society as a whole. And then we see that there are several different methods that allow us to determine what the contribution of an output to the economy as a whole is and is calculated. So accounting prices, when chosen in lieu and as a proxy of shadow prices, can be applied to both value-added analysis and economic cost-benefit analysis that we've introduced in the previous class. But however, they apply in a different way, as we have already initially explained in the previous class. Because the two methods adopt different procedures. In particular, the value-added analysis is strictly related to the system of national accounts. So value-added analysis intends to measure the contribution of all the production of goods and services to national income. So what matters here is the contribution, the accounting price should reflect the contribution that an output gives to the national income as a whole. Whereas in the case of the economic cost-benefit analysis, what matters is the correct economic value that each resource is. So we have first to calculate shadow prices, and then we can calculate net benefits, as we explained in the previous class. So what happens here is that in the case of value-added analysis, you measure the contribution of the output to the national income, but you have a problem because in this way you don't account for alternative use of that resource because you're not considering the opportunity cost as we saw in the example of the previous class. And you don't account for the interaction that the project has with other projects or activities. In other words, the risk of value-added analysis that does not properly account for externalities. Instead, when the accounting prices are reflecting shadow prices within the context of ECBA, in theory they should correct all the possible market distortion and should also therefore account for externalities and therefore with interactions with other projects. And because in this case the shadow price reflects the opportunity cost of the resource, and therefore at that point I have not to worry about the correction of value added as we did in the previous example, but the shadow prices already directly reflects the true economic value of the resources. So at that point accounting prices calculated within the setting of economic cost benefit analysis can be directly used to determine net benefit of the project. So we'll see then in more detail, in next classes we'll have a focus on both methodology. How accounting prices will be determined in practice in the two approaches. But here the idea, the basic idea that in the ECBA you already account in accounting prices for externalities and the interaction of the project with other projects, whereas this does not happen in value-added analysis. So in this case, we have to make a correction after that the value added has been initially estimated. So another issue that is important for determination of accounting prices is the so-called numeraire. The numeraire is, in other terms, the economic accounting unit that is used for measurement. So in other words, when you have an economic pricing that is based on accounting prices, you need to establish a common unit of accounts for expressing economic values. And there are several different dimensions that define this common unit of account. First of all, you have to make a choice about the unit of currency, in the sense that the price could be established both in domestic or in foreign currency. And so this is the first choice that we have to make when we define the numeraire. The second choice is about the value of the currency, and the choice that we could do here is whether to express the price of the resource in current or constant prices. And if you remember what we said about inflation in financial analysis, current prices means that the prices embed already expectations of inflation, whereas constant prices are deflated, so they do not embed inflation, so they assume that the prices are constant over time. The time aspect of currency is to be considered. In particular, we have to decide whether the accounting values should be discounted or not. In fact, the project is generating outputs for several years, and we know that time has a value, and so we have to decide if we want to work on accounting prices as they are, or if we want to discount the outputs that are in the future. Fourth aspect is we have to decide whether we want to refer to domestic market or foreign trade value, in the sense that above all when there are barriers to trade, as we'll discuss in the next class, you could have two different prices. One price is the price of the good of the service in the domestic market. The other will be the price on the border, that is the price of the good or services if this was imported or exported in a sense of trade barriers. So we have to decide whether to adopt a more international approach, and so refer to foreign trade value, or if you want to take a local approach, so referring to the domestic market price for the resource. Then we have to understand if you want to measure units of income, consumption, or savings investment. So this depends clearly on the objective of the analysis, the objective of the government for the analysis, and depending on whether the project is an objective related to income, consumption, or saving investment, we'll use different units. And finally, we have to define what is the class of recipients of the project benefits. Because here we say that in the economic analysis, we are measuring the impact of the project for the society as a whole. The impact of the project will be different for different groups of recipients, and so we have to clarify also what is the group of recipients that is interested in the project, and this could impact on the way we calculate the accounting price for the resources of the project. So just to provide an example of how these aspects are dealt with in a concrete case, here I report the case of the UNIDO numeraire. So I report the choices that UNIDO has made in the definition of the numeraire that is used by them in the economic analysis. So first of all, they refer to domestic currency, not to foreign currency, so the currency of the country where the project is realized. Second, they work on cost and prices. This means that the prices are unadjusted for inflation. Clearly, even though you're working on cost and prices, you could easily switch to current prices if you use some expected inflation rate to convert cost and prices in current prices. So this does not make a big difference. Then they use discounted value. So in case of benefits over a longer time span, these are discounted and the present value is calculated. Then they express the prices in domestic accounting currency. So they refer when a good or service is not foreign, it's not traded for export or imports, UNIDO use domestic accounting price. UNIDO is mainly interested in consumption. So here the numeraire is expressed in units of consumption. And finally, as concerns the group of interest that receive the benefits, the UNIDO define it as the base level of consumption. This definition corresponds to the level at which the government is indifferent to a unit of income in the hands or to the group, to the hands of the government or of the group. So this means that basically here we're talking about of a group that is not taxed and not subsidized. So this was useful just to understand in practice which kind of choices you can make about the definition of numeraire that then you will use to define all the prices for the economic analysis. So let's now pass to the last topic of this class that is quite complex, that is economic pricing of project resources. So here we are entering into the details of the economic pricing procedure that are applied to the evaluation of project resources in the perspective of the national view. So first of all, it's important to remark when economic pricing of project resources is needed. This is needed when two conditions exist. And these conditions have been partially discussed also in a previous class, and the project, that economic analysis has a prominent effect on the analysis and is correcting large price distortion. So what does that mean? First of all, that when you apply economics versus financial analysis, you get very different results. So this means prominent effect on the analysis. So that the consideration of the economic nature that complement or integrate the financial analysis are so important that you get to completely or to very, very different results in terms of decision criteria, and so you need to apply to make an additional effort to run also an economic analysis. And second, economic analysis is needed when there are large price distortion, because we remember that financial analysis is based on market value, when economic values that represent the benefits of resources for the world economy and society are very different from the market value for due to the existence of large price distortion. Then economic analysis is strongly needed for a better assessment of the project and for more efficient allocation of the resources. In particular, shadow pricing application that is at the basis of economic analysis, in particular of the economic cost-benefit analysis, is particularly required when, for example, the economic value is at least 5% different from the financial value. So this is a general practical indication that is given. And when the outputs of the project have significant effects on the resource flow in the economy. So this means that shadow pricing application typically is made for these kinds of resources. First of all, the main outputs of an economic system that clearly are relevant for the economy as a whole. So it's important to understand what is their true economic value. For imported or potentially importable material inputs, because also in this case there could be strong price distortion, there could be impact on the outputs of an economy. So also in this case, economic analysis is, and particular shadow pricing, is strongly suggested. In the case of main non-imported material inputs that have a strong cost implication, and finally unskilled labor for which typically will serve higher distortion in the market prices. So as concerns pricing level, we have to remark that economic pricing requires that values are assigned to inputs and outputs of a project. So this can be done in two different ways and at two different levels that here are defined as economic efficiency prices and social prices. So what is the meaning of these two definitions? Economic efficiency prices typically measure the gross impact of the use of generation of a resource on some measure of undifferentiated income. So undifferentiated income in this context means that we don't account for distribution of this income. So we just look at the contribution that a resource consumption or production makes to the total income of a nation, but we don't care, we're not interested at this level of how this is distributed, this impact is distributed across social groups. So we are not concerned at this stage with eventual social imbalances that will be at least partially corrected by the project. On the contrary, social prices also accounts for the distribution of these impacts across social groups, so they are concerned also about the beneficial effects that a project can have in the solution of social and economic imbalances. As concerns pricing basis for economic pricing, we can distinguish at least three main approaches that we define as consumer willingness to pay, production costs, and border prices. So consumer willingness to pay will refer to the willing to pay for a given output of the consumers. And so this measure reflects the marginal utility that a consumer receives from a given resource, and so should also include the consumer surplus. So this is the theoretical price that in equilibrium the consumer would like to pay to get the resource. The production cost is the cost clearly needed for the production of the resource, but here when we refer to production costs within the specific setting of economic analysis, we have to make an important adjustment, because the production costs that we have considered so far consider all the inputs at market values. So all the inputs have a cost that reflects their market price because they being bought at market prices. However, if we are concerned about the economic value of a resource and we want to adopt the production cost approach, we should isolate the different components of the production cost, so referring to different factors of production, and then be sure that these factors are valued at the economic, within economic price. So they should, each of the component of the production cost, if needed, so if there are market distortions, should be valued at economic prices, reflecting the true value from an economic point of view of that component. Clearly, once that I disaggregate the production cost, I could have some components that have a market value that is not so distorted, so in this case the market value is not so different from the economic value, so it does not need adjustment. But there could be some production cost that instead reflects a strong distortion. In this case, for this production cost, I should correct the market value and recalculate the economic value, and so in the end, aggregating all the components and get a more correct measure of production cost in the perspective of the economic analysis. Finally, the last approach is border prices. Border prices mainly refer to export prices and to import prices. In particular, the definition that we'll see are FOB for export, where FOB means free on board, and CHIB for import prices, that states for cost, insurance, and freight. So in the case given goods or services is traded in foreign markets, the border prices can be easily assessed. So all the three approaches can be adopted clearly for the pricing of our resources, but as we'll see in more detail in next classes, we will leave some discretion in choosing the one or the other. And the most important problems will be related to the goods that are not traded in international market but could be traded, so they are tradable. And the only reasons why I'm not traded is because of restriction to trade or other regulations. Because it's clear that when we have traded goods, or goods that are exported or goods that are imported, the clear price from an economic point of view is the price at the border. So it's the price that you get at the export and the price that you pay at the import. So we'll see this aspect also in particular in the next class, but this is quite clear. At the same moment, in the same way, we can say that goods that for some reasons are non-tradable, so goods that anyhow cannot be traded in foreign markets, the consumer willingness to pay and the production cost will be the only approaches that can be used. So we are not particular problems. The problem will be about those goods that at the moment are not traded but could be traded in the future if the regulation, the policy changes. Because at the moment, these goods have an economic value that reflects either the consumer willingness to pay or the production cost, but at domestic level, so the pricing is domestic. However, if these goods were traded, we would observe possibly different prices because the export and the import prices could be different from the domestic prices. So here we have to understand why we should use border prices or domestic prices as represented by consumer willingness to pay and production costs for non-tradable goods. So we'll see that there are a set of criteria that we can follow to understand whether border prices or domestic prices apply in this particular case. But what we can say is that the decision of choosing a domestic price approach based on the willingness to pay or the production cost or a border pricing will also be affected by what we define as the pricing framework. In particular, we'll see that we can apply three different pricing frameworks in economic analysis that are defined as international markets, society's goals, and development policies. In the case of international markets, typically the decision makers take a global perspective. So it's interested in international trade, it's not only interested in domestic perspective. And this framework reflects the underlying idea that resources should be allocated in the most efficient way. So in this case, international trade with the export and imports should allow the decision maker to find the best optimal solution for resource allocation independent of trading decisions. So you should find the trading balance that allows you to get the maximum payoff for the economy as a whole. And this means that all goods should be priced at the border. So the implication of adopting an international markets framework is that in the end, when we look at the pricing basis, we should prefer also in dubious cases like the ones of tradable goods, the border prices. The other two pricing frameworks that are society's goals and development policies instead are more concentrated on the domestic perspective and on local development. In particular, the society's goals perspective is more interested in the outcome for the society, for the local society. And so it's less concerned about the international trades and about the optimal allocation of resources within a global perspective. Even though this pricing framework creates a problem in defining what the relevant society is, because you could define the term society with different meanings. And finally, development policy framework is a local framework that assumes that development policy that's been adopted by a government will be the same also in the future, in the sense that if there is some government policy that is restricted the foreign trading or that is protecting foreign trading in some industry, the government is performing the economic analysis within the context of this development policy. So it's not evaluating whether this development policy is creating value or not for the economy, but is considering that this development policy will still be adopted, will be adopted in the future in any condition. And so the analysis is more concerned about that situation. So the implication of adopting a more local pricing framework, and in particular of adopting a pricing framework that gives development policy as constant in the decision, is that when we have to choose among the pricing basis for the inputs and outputs of a project, we'll refer to the domestic prices, domestic economic values as expressed by willingness to pay and production cost. And this is for a very simple reason. If at the moment you're implementing a development policy that does not allow international trade of some goods, and if you assume that this policy will not be changed in the future, so these tradable goods becomes a non-tradable goods, because in any case you won't be able to trade the goods on the foreign market. So this means that using border prices for the determination of the economic value of these goods will make no sense at all, because it's not technical, because foreign trade is not technically feasible. And so the only possible solution is to apply domestic prices based on willingness to pay and production costs. So in other words, what we can say to summarize the conclusion of the pricing framework and the pricing basis is that if you have a traded good, the only criterion to determine the economic value is the border price coming from the export or the import price. If we have a non-tradable good, then the only solution is to apply domestic prices based on willingness to pay and production cost. When you have tradable goods that are goods that at the moment are not traded in foreign markets but could be traded in foreign markets if the policy changes, the decision about the pricing basis will be affected by the choice of the pricing framework. And in particular, if I want to price from an economic point of view a good that is tradable but not currently traded on a foreign market, if I'm adopting an international market perspective, I will choose the border price anyhow. So even though the good is not traded on the foreign market, I will use the export or the import price as an opportunity cost for the country. That is the cost of applying a restrictive policy on foreign trading. On the contrary, if I'm adopting a pricing framework that is based on the actual development policy and that assumes that development policy will not be changed in the future, then the tradable good that I'm analyzing will become a non-tradable good because export and imports will not be feasible. So adopting a border price will not make any sense, and in this case the economic analysis will more concentrated on domestic pricing and in particular on the willingness to pay the consumer or the production cost calculated in terms of economic value. So at this point we have set the basis for a more thorough analysis of economic pricing. So in the next class we'll discuss with further details the difference of pricing with different kinds of goods, and we'll see how the three pricing bases are adopted for different goods and services. So this class at this point is ended. I thank you for the attention, and I remind you that for any additional material you can refer to the course website. Thank you.